what it is hot. Oh, namaskar, everybody. Most of us are moving through life carrying this unexamined assumption. It's that our thoughts are the truth. That what we feel, what we believe, what we fear, what we imagine, all of these narratives we carry, that they're all real. So we don't just have thoughts. We are those thoughts. We identify with them. We react to them. We defend them. And when we do this, we become caught up in, we imprison ourselves within them. Now, from a purely psychological lens, this creates what we call a narrative self. So the mind tells a story about who you are, what has happened to you, what's wrong with you, what might go wrong in the future, and what you have to fix in order to feel better. And you believe it. Not because it's true, but because there has never been space between you and the narration. And if there has been, it hasn't been long enough for you to not get caught up in this narration. So this inner dialogue, it becomes the backdrop of our reality. It becomes the lens through which we interpret every moment. And here's the catch with this, is that the body believes what the mind is saying, because it's just one interconnected expression. So what happens in the mind without meditation? So without meditation. So in the absence of this kind of inner awareness, meaning we're caught up in the thoughts and the narrative all the time. The mind, it's reactive. It's on autopilot. It constantly compares, judges, anticipates, analyzes. It replays all of these past wounds. It rehearses all of these future fears and problems. And it fixates on approval, on validation, on control. So that is what most people call normal. But psychologically, it's a highly unstable state. So the default mode network, right? The part of the brain associated with self-referencing thoughts, it's overactive. And this overactivity leads to this constant low-grade stress. So the amygdala, it's responsible for detecting all of these threats. It gets hijacked by thought alone here. Even if you're sitting safely at home, your thoughts can make your body react as if you are under attack. And that reaction here, that triggers this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal. So that's your HPA axis. So cortisol, this hormone, this cortisol, it floods the system. Adrenaline surges here. Your heart rate increases. Breathing becomes shallow. And so digestive function slows down. Immune response weakens. And this is all because of thought. Just a thought. That thought was believed. So we learn all of this with Ananda Marga, the path of bliss. It's a yogic and tantric tradition. And we learn all of this through biopsychology, the study of this biopsychology. It's how the mind can and directly does affect the body's glands and subglands to release specific hormones due to these thoughts, which creates this physical reactivity, right? So now the mind, it's just suffering, and the body's suffering. It's all suffering all at once. So this is the breeding ground for anxiety disorders, for depression, for psychosomatic illness, addictions, emotional dysregulation. It's pretty heavy stuff. So when a person begins to meditate, they're not entering peace. They're entering awareness. And this awareness in the beginning can feel overwhelming. So you just sit down, you close your eyes, and suddenly there's noise, there's thoughts racing, there's all of these sensations, they're flickering around, all of these discomforts are rising, and all this restlessness is just coming forth. It's erupting throughout the entire body and mind, and you're going to think this is making things worse, but it's not making anything worse. It's just the first time that you're seeing clearly what the mind has been doing all along. So when you sit alone with yourself and you feel these racing thoughts, these overwhelming emotions, they have always been there, right? It's not because of meditation, it's not because of paying attention to your thoughts that the thoughts suddenly change and become this overwhelm. That's always been there. You're just beginning to recognize it. So the beginning of meditation is the beginning of honesty. It's the meeting point between the unconscious and the conscious. And in that meeting point, you start to observe rather than react. And it's hard for a lot of people. They say, I have a hard time sitting with myself. Right? And if you're not sitting with yourself, you're just projecting all of these things outward in order to not recognize them or be aware of them. So the shift from reactivity to observation, it's the first sign of healing. So let's understand this psychologically. So in therapy, one of the key goals is to develop what's called the observing ego. This is the capacity to witness your inner experience without being consumed by it. So as a Vedic counselor with my training, this is one of my specialties here. So meditation, it does this directly, right? Meditation allows you this capacity to witness your inner experience without being consumed by it, right? Meditation does this directly. So when you witness a thought without grabbing onto it or pushing it away, you deactivate its charge. You disidentify. And when you disidentify, the body stops reacting to it as though it's this kind of life or death situation, right? The amygdala here, it calms down. That HPA, it access, it quiets. Your cortisol decreases. Oxytocin and serotonin levels, they can begin to naturally rise. And you start to breathe slower, deeper. Your parasympathetic nervous system, this rest and digest, this system, it kicks in, right? And this physiological shift allows the body and the brain to heal, right? You're creating new neural pathways which are healthy and not dependent upon this narrative which has always been there, simply because of this meditative process of developing or uncovering the awareness which has always been there. So meditation in this way, it's not about relaxing. It's about reconditioning your entire psychoneurological experience here, okay? So you are literally training the mind to become a non-reactive space. And with regular meditation, the brain, it begins to change. Neuroplasticity ensures the patterns you repeat become your new default. So you repeat this meditative practice, and this neuroplasticity, it ensures these new patterns which you're repeating, they become the new default. That's what you want, right? You have to take valued action for these new changes to occur. So the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for insight, emotional regulation, responsible for perspective, it grows stronger. The default mode network, it quiets, and the mind becomes less self-referential and more in the now. It becomes more present. You begin to live in the moment rather than thinking about the moment. Okay? You begin to live in the moment rather than thinking about the moment. And here's the key here, is that you're no longer inside the narrative. You're observing it now. This is an enormous difference, right? It's an enormous difference. And the moment that shift occurs, even once, you realize something. You realize, I'm not this mind. I'm not this voice, this narrative. I'm not this story. I'm the observer of this narrative, the observer of this story. And that observation is unaffected by anything. So with that, we go deeper. We go deeper here. So when meditation here, when it's done consistently, it just begins to mature. And when the mind becomes sufficiently still, you begin to recognize a profound presence behind the thoughts. Not a blankness, not a void, but this kind of ever-present luminous stillness, a changeless awareness that is not entangled in thought, but it's silently watching all thought come and go. I like to refer to as awareness, resting in awareness for the sake of awareness. And this is what we call Atman. Atman is the self with a capital S. Not the self-image, not the story, not the narrative, not the body, not the personality, right? Not the character, right? But the conscious presence that knows all of these things just simply come and go. They're transient. It was here before thought. It remains when thoughts dissolve. And it doesn't react. It just simply observes. It just simply sees. Atman is this pure witnessing awareness. It's not touched by joy or sorrow, by success or failure, by fame or anything. It's not touched by anything. It's this silent sky in which all weather arises and then fades. And when you learn to abide in this space, even just briefly, every narrative, every trigger, every trauma, they naturally begin to lose their grip. And it's not because you suppressed it. Not at all. We don't suppress anything at all. Not because you suppress it, but because you stopped being it. So, looking at this on a biochemical level, returning back to biopsychology, as taught through my guru Sri Sri Anandamurti with Ananda Marga, or the Path of Bliss, when you no longer believe the thought, I am not good enough, I am suffering, I hurt, right? The body doesn't produce these, you can call them shame hormones, right? Hormones that are associated with the thoughts and feelings of shame. And when you no longer react to the memory of betrayal, your body doesn't release adrenaline here. So when the narrative isn't engaged, the chemical cascade, it stops. So instead, the body enters coherence. Heart rate variability, it increases. This vagus nerve, we've all heard this, right? About the vagus nerve. It's stimulated. And neurotransmitters that are associated with healing, like GABA, serotonin, all of these endorphins, they are produced. That gives way to a very healthy biochemical internal environment for us. Your physiology, it becomes aligned with this inner space, right? With inner peace. Not because you changed the story, but because you disengaged from it altogether. You recognize you are not the story, you're the observer of the story. And that simple act of recognition of oneself as the observer of the story, as the one who disengages, that is Atman, right? The habitual mind lives in reaction because it's based in memory. The awakened mind lives in awareness because it's free from all of these things. It recognizes memory, it recognizes mind, but it doesn't entwine and mesh itself with it. And meditation here, between that subconscious and that conscious mind, it's the bridge. It's the bridge between the two. So meditation isn't simply just sitting and gardening and being lost in the moment. That is a wonderful mindfulness experience, but it's not meditation, right? Meditation means that we practice consistently, right? It means we we focus the mind, and this is through dharana, this focusing of the mind. And by focusing the mind, we realize that we are the observer of the mind, right? And this meditation rewires the nervous system, it reshapes the brain, and it reveals the truth of your own being here. It shows that you are not broken, that your suffering is not your identity. Your suffering is not your identity. That healing is not about fixing the mind, it's about seeing through it. You are the observer of what is occurring within your mind. Meditation assists us with developing it. That's all it can do. That's what its purpose is, to move us beyond the enmeshment with this reactive mind. And it's not a lifestyle trend. It's a direct path back to yourself, the Atman. Yeah, it does. It heals psychological patterns. It quiets the body's stress response. It rewires the brain and your nervous system. But above all, it returns you to the unshakable presence of what and who you truly are. Think about that. It's profound. It's beautiful. We all have this. And when you live from Atman, you no longer chase peace, because you are peace. Not the peace that comes and goes with circumstances here, but the peace that's untouched, that's ever present, that's always here. It's always available because it's you. That's what meditation reveals. That is what heals the mind. That is what sets you free here. Thank you for watching. And if this helped in any way, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And remember, you are not your story. You're not your story. You're not the narrative. You're not all of these things which are coming and going. You're not your suffering. You are that which observes it. And staying and remaining in that place of the observer allows you to be free from that which is suffering. Not because you're suppressing it, but simply because you are aware of it and abiding within that awareness. Namaskar.